Hi, Year 4. Today we are looking at decimals. You may already know a little bit about decimals. You would have done them earlier in the year. Today we are just going to expand on our ideas that we have about decimals and apply them to real world situations. We know that a decimal is used to write a number that is not a whole, and that decimals actually sit between two whole numbers on a number line. So the example I've given you here is 12.5. We know that this decimal would sit in the middle of 12 and 13. We know that this decimal is a decimal because it contains the decimal point, which separates the whole number from the fractional part. So we're saying we've got 12 whole numbers here, and then the 0.5 is the fractional part. Now, we also can represent decimals as fractions. They are very closely interlinked together. 12.5 is the same as saying 12 and a half, like this mixed fraction we have here. It's really important when we are learning about decimals that we use our knowledge of fractions to help us in determining the size of a decimal because they work really close together. We use decimals all the time in the real world. We use them to measure the lengths of things, the mass of things, and in money, just to name a few examples. The examples I've got here for you is 1.23 meters. We know this is a decimal because we've got 1 whole meter and then we've got 23 centimeters. The same example here with $2.50. The same thing applies. We've got 2 whole dollars and then 50 cents. I'm just going to share my screen and show you a couple of examples. So here you can see that I have a place value mat just down here. You should be pretty familiar with these, even if it's just this side, the left side that you have seen. This is where we would put our whole numbers in if we were looking at whole numbers for place value. But as we move into decimals, we have our decimal point and we move on to the right side of the place value mat, which actually has some smaller fractional components. So we're looking at tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. We know that when we work with decimals that it's really important to make sure that we put the decimal point in the right spot. A couple of examples I've got here just to show you the connection between decimals and fractions. If we were to write the decimal 0.2, we have no ones and we have 2 tenths, and that's the same as writing 2 over 10 or 2 tenths, and we know because it's in this column here with that says tenths, so it gives us a bit of a clue. If we were to write 0.02, this decimal is actually smaller than the one we just did. 0 ones, 0 tenths, and 2 hundredths. Okay, so we can also represent that as a fraction as 2 over 100. So our decimals are getting smaller and smaller. And the next one I want to show you is 0.002, which, as you can probably guess by now, is going to be very small. And we're actually looking at 2 over 1,000. Okay, so that's the connection that decimals have with fractions. They're very interconnected, and you can see here, if you're stuck, that the headings actually give you a clue on where they sit in terms of a fraction as well. I'm just going to rub this out so we can have a look at some real life examples. Okay, so 18.3 meters. Now, I did say before that sometimes we do tend to drop the 0 off the end of our decimals. So if I was to write 18.3 meters on our place value chart, it would say 8 ones, 0.3 meters. Now, generally this would have a 0 on the end because we would say 18 meters and 30 centimeters, but in English and maths, sometimes we can get a bit lazy and we drop them to make it just easier, but you just have to remember, use your knowledge of fractions to help you understand that 18.3 does not mean 3 centimeters, it means 30. If we're writing much bigger numbers, 3,000, we know that it would sit in these columns. Here, we know that we have 3,000s, no hundreds, no tens, and no ones. Now it's saying 0.45 kilograms. So we're putting the 4 in the tenths column and the 5 in the hundredths. And the same goes if we were going to write the money amount of $215.30. We would write 2 in the hundreds, 1 in the tens, 5 in the ones. We've got our decimal point in the middle, and we're going to do 30 cents.